Welcome back, friends. This is Virgil Bunau. I'm your host. Conversations over sweet tea. Today, I have a really cool guest. Um, he is one of the reasons why I'm 42 years old. He's one of the reasons why I'm still able to carry 30 pounds, 25 pounds worth of equipment on any given wedding day. I shoot about 30 to 40 weddings a year. And from time to time, I go see him. His practice is about a few miles away from my house. Actually, it's about half a block away from my office. By trade, he falls under the umbrella of the chiropractor practice, but I think he's way more than what others are offering out there. And he's able to treat me in many different ways: my elbow, my knees, my back. But so I think he's pretty amazing. He's got magic hands that heal people. So I wanted to bring him to the show because I think it's very, very important. He's got a lot of great insight, especially for not just for photographers, but for you all out there that are listening. If you are into making sure that you are 100% at your job, she's probably the person to see. So I don't want to blab. I'm going to get him to talk some more. So without further ado, I want to introduce Dr. Jeremiah Jimerson.
Good afternoon.
How are you, man?
Awesome.
Thanks
Awesome.
thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I'm going to turn my laptop so I can kind of turn towards you. So just a real quick brief introduction. Tell me a little bit about you. Who are you? And then what's your practice like?
Okay. Dr. Jeremiah Jimerson, chiropractor by trade, but I focus more on soft tissue. So, traditionally when people think about chiropractic, it's, hey, a bone's out of place. And so I started specializing in some soft tissue kind of right off the bat. But initially it was like, well, why is that bone coming out of place? And it came down to the muscle. And then eventually it was like, well, why that muscle? And I also focus a lot on integrative medicine, so trying to kind of get to the root cause of people's diseases.
That's cool. So if people are asking about chiropractors, most people they think about adjustments and packages and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Tell me how different is your practice?
Yeah, I'm anti all that. My goal is to get you out of my office as quick as possible, and not in terms of the time that you're there, but discharge your injury as quick as possible, and honestly try to educate you so that you don't have to come back. We get, people get tune-ups from time to time, but yeah, my goal is to not have you in the office, and that's kind of what keeps my reputation going.
So what is that? I've heard the phrase active release. What does that mean?
Active release it's a patented soft tissue technique that I started specializing in back in about 2004, and at the time, it was just had a lot of kind of clout behind it. When I first started working in Buffalo, the Buffalo Bills just started showing up on my doorstop for treatment, and I had no idea what the hell I was doing back then.
Yeah. So some of the things that you work on, let's say one of the things that came to see you for, I had this, I don't know what's the scientific term, but I had this tennis elbow.
Yeah, lateral. They call it lateral epicondylitis. So
that's the scientific term.
It just basically says, hey, you got some inflammation on the outside portion of your elbow, but they like to make things complicated.
So for photographers like me, we carry cameras a lot like that. Like on my right hand, I feel like I'm using my forearm all the time.
Yep.
And I think I pulled it not when I was working, but when I was working out and lifting weights. So let's say somebody like that, if I experience again or one of my friends experiences, what would be something that I should be doing first?
You always want to play Sherlock Holmes. You want to try to kind of break down like how the hell did that happen to begin with, and so I always try to think in terms of like muscles, soft tissue injuries. We're always taking a look at repetitive strain, and there's a physics equation that describes it. It's very boring. It's I equals NF over AR, but if you think about it, it's kind of like back in the old days when they used to have those typewriters with the the old time typewriters, the Coronas,
Right.
you really had to push that key down pretty far. And everybody was really slow typers, and so what that meant was that the muscles had a chance to kind of relax and kind of chill out in between. So fast forward to today, you got this Mac keyboard, and it's got these tiny little keys and very small amplitude, so you barely have to push it down very far. But that means that people type a million miles a minute, so those muscles are constantly under tension, which means they're going to build up scar tissue a lot more. So that's kind of what I'm typically trying to do when people come in to see me with muscle stuff, is like, okay, what are they doing repetitively kind of throughout the day?
So like when I'm editing, I'm always using my right hand for my mouse.
Exactly.
That's why I hate this pad mouse. You always try to use a different mouse.
Yeah. So when you're using that mouse, like even though you're not like lifting anything heavy and it doesn't look strenuous, just the fact that that fine motor motion, all of those muscles going all the way up your arm have to stay in that constant tension for that extended period of time, and it basically starts starving the muscles off. So your body's going to start laying down extra collagen or scar tissue in that area.
So what should we do? Like a lot of us photographers, and even probably people that work in office, we're always typing and stuff like that. What's a good advice that would be?
A couple different things you can mess with. You can buy like a pistol grip mouse that kind of takes some of the pressure off of your arm. You could come up for air, maybe set up your phone to remind you like every 15 minutes just to shake it out, stretch those muscles out. That kind of like pumps some food back into it.
Gotcha.
And sometimes, honestly, even like switch it up. Like if you're right-handed, try switching with your left-handed, and I know some people are like, man, I can't do that, but that's also a really good brain exercise as well. That will help keep your brain nice and healthy.
Do you ever wear an Apple Watch?
I don't.
I have an Apple Watch that tells me to stand up every so often.
Yeah.
I didn't set it, but it might have been Apple that sets it every 30 minutes. It tells me, or maybe it's every hour.
Yeah.
It tells me to stand up. So is that a good thing, I guess?
Yeah. But I would probably push it even a little bit more than that. I would go, probably, like I said, every 15, 20 minutes, get up, shake it out, stretch it out just for a couple of seconds. And I know that's really hard for people when they're in the zone or trying to get in the zone, but for like health's sake, that's probably the best bang for your buck.
So that pistol grip that you were talking about, that's the one that you obviously were on the podcast, but it's like a triangular shape and you grab it with your...
Yeah, it looks like an actual, I think like a pistol. So instead of your palm facing like the ground or the table, it's facing out to the side.
Gotcha. What do you think about those little balls that it's like more a stress ball, I guess. You squeeze it. Do those help at all?
Yes and no. I mean, it's one of those that like, you're always that portion of your muscles are always stuck in that shortened position, and so you squeeze that, and that that puts them even more into that shortened position.
Gotcha.
So people need to work the opposite muscles, those extensor muscles that actually like open up your fingers, and maybe take like a rubber band and put it around your fingers and then kind of open it up a little bit.
Got it. Perfect. So tell me a little bit about the people that you're seeing. I wanted to kind of give context to the people that are listening. Like, you see a lot of athletes.
I see a ton of athletes.
A ton, right? And then you also see a lot of older people that have back pain and things like lingering pain and stuff like that.
I get lots of the really, really weird cases, So, I've been word of mouth for over a decade now, and I'd say about half of my my referrals come from a couple of orthopedic surgeons over at Roper St. Francis. So I'm kind of the backup when nothing else works. They start sending them over to me. So I'll see those really weird, complicated cases that has everybody kind of scratching their heads.
So do you see them pre-surgery, I guess? Are you like the last line of defense before they go in?
Sometimes. Like, for instance, the one orthopedic surgeon, he sent a guy over for like this knee pain, and he's like, for what this guy's got going on, he goes, I could do surgery, but he's not very cut happy. So he's like, I don't want to do surgery because it doesn't typically have good outcomes. And he's like, and he's tried PT, he's done the massage therapy, he's pretty much done everything. So, it's up to you. See what you can find.
Right.
So yeah, kind of a last resort guy.
Every time I see you, you're like, you put me in this little bench, and I feel like you put your entire weight on me at sometimes when you stretch me. But when I get out of there, it's just like, oh man, what a breath of fresh air coming out of there. So how does that work? How do you know? I mean, I guess just because of you, this is your specialty.
Yeah, I mean, it, from like a.
What's your process like? Yeah, when you see patients. You first ask them, obviously, what's up, right? What's wrong?
Yeah, and then, I mean, from the moment like somebody walks in, I am like just getting an idea in terms of I'm like looking at their intake, and I'm like, okay, this is what they do, and I'm like, okay, they're married, they're not married, what other type of health issues do they have? So I even start kind of thinking like kind of chemically. I look at them, and kind of get an idea as to like what diet do I, think that they're on. What is their lifestyle like? I try to kind of take, everything in, and then I like just hearing, how they're describing, their issues to me, and are they positive about it, and
right.
Stuff like that.
You almost have to kind of read their minds, because sometimes it's hard to describe.
Yeah.
What's bothering you, right?
Yeah.
The last time I saw you, I think I pulled my lower back. I don't remember. I remember. I was doing some deadlifts, and somehow I just got distracted,
right.
But I was out for, not really completely out, but man, good thing I didn't have a wedding that week.
Yeah.
And I tried to do leg exercises on Mondays. After that, I was like, you know what? I'm never gonna do a leg exercise on Friday before a wedding, because I never know what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
But that happened, good thing it happened on a Tuesday, and I went to see you immediately, and you got me in. And then I felt really bad. But you asked me to come see you every week, and it was still lingering, and I think I was fine after the following week. But some of the things that I kind of messaged you about that I wanted to ask you were like, all right, I'm a photographer. We shoot about 30, 40 weddings a year. Everything that we do requires some kind of, either we're lifting a couch, moving things, we're moving chairs, heavy chairs, we're carrying equipment on our backs. And what are the things that you think that we should do? Like, obviously, we gotta kind of have to be in shape. Like shooting a wedding for 12 hours.
Oh, for sure.
It's like a marathon, right? It's like more like I want to say a Spartan race, I feel like. What are the things that you think we should do as far as to have sustainability, to take care of ourselves?
Pretty much what everybody, I think everybody, needs to train for their job. But, it's incorporating, strength, like you said, you're lifting couches, you're lifting chairs, so, that's not one of those things that you want to like lift, 5-pound weights, you want to practice lifting heavy stuff, because the stronger you are, the less of a toll, less, that's gonna, mess with your body,
Right.
So get used to lifting, heavy stuff. And then I would also, focus on doing, like some high intensity interval, type training, fast and hard, and, and then a little bit of a resting period, and then fast and hard and a little bit of a rest period.
Let's go back to the lifting heavy. Like, what kind of things that we should do, like squats or deadlifts, or what do you think?
Yeah, I would definitely recommend, learning how to deadlift, and it's one of those that, I highly recommend, get a trainer that knows what they're doing, and, have them take you through it. And then, every so often, hey man, how's my form? Like,
right.
Am I starting to pick up any bad habits? And that was a lesson that, that I even had to learn, no matter how much I could know or learn about, this stuff, it's very difficult to see that, you see yourself doing goofy things.
So if it's been a while since you lifted anything before, as far as weights or gone to the gym, would you suggest to lift heavy right away, or just lightweight first and focus on form? Or?
Definitely lighter weight, but they say, do lighter weight, but pretend like you're lifting, the heaviest weight possible. You should always be setting up and not being distracted, and and staying tight, so that you're not throwing anything off.
So definitely you suggest see a trainer first, even for one or two or three sessions, just to get started.
Yeah, to start, getting the basics of, like, let's say squatting or deadlifting.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So what about the high intensity training? Sometimes they call it HIIT, right?
Yeah,
HIIT.
HIT or
So it's like is that
Tabata training. They're typically like fast and hard, like as hard as possible of some type of activity for between 20 and 30 seconds, and then rest times vary depending on what you're trying to do. So, for instance, there's been some good, mitochondrial biogenesis, studies. So your mitochondria is basically the power plant in your cells, and you can actually grow more of those, and you can make them, even stronger. So,
right.
you want your cells to really produce energy. But those, I want to say those had like a 4 or 5 minute like rest time in between, like a 30-second, all out as hard as possible, sprint.
Is CrossFit a HIIT or Orange Theory?
CrossFit, yeah, those can be a hit type training, but sometimes they last a little bit too long, or sometimes they can get almost a little bit too competitive. I'll see definitely a bunch of injuries related from being too competitive. Always trying to beat what the next person is doing instead of worrying about yourself. And a lot of what they're doing is kind of complex moves like a deadlift followed by set of deadlifts followed by like overhead presses followed by some burpees or whatever, and it's easy for your form to start kind of dying down
right.
As you're midway through that. So I wouldn't recommend pushing too far into that, and I'm not knocking either one of those,
Right.
but I'm just saying for these purposes.
What about some people start picking up running again, training half marathons or 10Ks, 5Ks? Will those help or?
It definitely could help. It's one of those you've got to biomechanically be down, pretty on top of your stuff, because it's like a car that's out of alignment. If something is just off a little bit times thousands upon thousands of repetitions,
right,
that's one of the reasons why I see so many running related injuries.
Yeah, so maybe a mixture of the running and
you don't want to. I'm a huge fan of you don't really want to specialize in any one thing, and,
right.
And I that's where I see a lot of injuries from people. The swimmers that's all they want to do is swim. They're going to get weird repetitive strain because that's all they do is swim, or from pretty much any sport you can think of.
Yeah,
so mix it up.
Whenever that's such a good advice. I always think about my training or like during the week, what I'm doing with my week whenever I'm shooting a wedding, because especially towards the end of the night when we're shooting and it's where you're at the 10th hour and you still have 2 hours to go.
Yeah.
And it's almost like for me, it's hard to, like my bags are usually on the ground. It's hard for me to either like squat down or sit without having to feel anything on my knees, because I've been on my feet for the last 10 hours. And it just goes back. It's like, man, I need to do something, maybe stretches or something, or
I'm a huge fan of like just the whole movement culture, so like there's even workouts, there's different gymnastic style workouts. There's workouts called animal flow or original strength, and they're all more like movement based instead of necessarily like stretching, because you're building strength and you're practicing your body's ability to move in these things, so like so for instance, I know you've been in and and I've said practice your ass to grass squat,
right.
Get used to hanging out with your heels on the ground and just letting your butt drop and hang out like that. I mean, that made huge differences in my biomechanics and just the way I felt in general, and it was definitely an eye-opener in terms of like how tight and how much we don't actually practice that stuff.
I actually do that a lot everywhere I go. If I'm waiting, or even at weddings, when there's some time where there's a waiting period, I'll just squat down like how I think how I used to see when I was in the Philippines, how the older people would squat down and read newspaper and drink their coffee in the middle of a dirt road or streets. And I forgot what I called it, but I just call it the Asian squat. But I'm surprised actually that not a lot of people can do that.
Oh yeah,
Can
yeah. I
go all
mean,
the way down.
yeah, and that's I thought to the same time back in my 20s I went to Hong Kong, and I was absolutely obviously I was never doing this back then. But I remember walking by and I saw this 80 some year old guy reading a newspaper, and he was sitting like that, on the side of the road. And I walked by, and I probably came back like an hour and a half later on, and he was still sitting like that.
Right.
And it's I take kids that are 7, 8 years old in our country, and have them squat down, and they fall right over because their ankles are so tight because they don't use that. We're sitting in chairs all the time. We're sitting in our couches, and again, it's a use it or lose it.
Yeah.
Type
What does it stretch really? It stretches everything. Your back.
Yeah, everything. That's one of the that's the beauty of it.
Like your shin and your
your ankles, your knees, your hips, your the whole shebang going all the way up. Plus you kind of strengthen up those postural muscles, so that you're not falling over forward. So yeah,
that's like my go-to stretch nowadays.
Yeah.
It's like I do it a couple times throughout the day. So when do you know to get up when it's starting to hurt?
Initially in the beginning, so I had started doing this when I first started doing this a challenge. It was, you were supposed to hang out for a half an hour in that position every single day.
Half an hour.
And
like total or
total cumulative.
Oh, okay.
Cumulative.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
And but like I was goofball like everybody else, where I'm always just trying to beat like my previous time, so like I went from 1 minute to 2 minutes to 3, and I was trying to stay up there for 6 minutes through the pain, shaking like a leaf,
Yeah.
sweating. And I was about 2 weeks into that, and I'm like, damn, my knee hurts, my back is kind of getting a little sore. I'm like, man, this probably isn't good for me. And then I had to think back, and I'm like, no, you donut, like you push it too far. And so it's a physiologic law that soft tissue adapts to stresses that you place on it over time. So over time, even bone will move.
Yeah.
But you can't rush it. Otherwise you're going to cause injury. And so that's typically what you want to do.
Yeah.
Little short durations, and eventually get yourself to the point that that you're not just squatting just for because of this challenge. You're squatting because you're integrating it into your actual life when you're playing with your kids, or if you're changing a tire, or if you're resting. Like that should be your resting posture.
So what is the official scientific or athletic term for the squatting? Like we call it ass to grass kind of thing, but what's the official move stretch? What's the name of it?
I don't even know. As though
it's hard to say because we're on the podcast, but
it's been in I don't know, it's been part of mankind for
you just basically squat all the way down with your knees obviously up, and you feel the stretch in your back and your butt.
Yeah, your heels.
I'll try to put
your heels are on the ground, So typically in like Western culture, you'll squat down, but your heels will be popped up. You want your heels on the ground, or if you're most people, their ankles are too tight, so sometimes I'll teach them how to put like a stack of books underneath their heels, just to to help take some of the stress off their ankles. And then as their ankles start getting looser, then you can start, removing a book or a magazine, at a time.
The other day, I started actually thinking, like, when am I not going to be able to do this? Because I'm just so grateful that I'm able to do it, because I know a lot of people that can't do it.
Yeah.
And, so I was just very grateful I'm able to do it, because I know Mark, this guy that I work out with at the gym, sometimes I see him there. It's like, hey, man, can you do this? Like, no, I can't do that.
Yeah.
So when is that time when I can't do it anymore? I guess just we'll find out when you get old, when you have knee problems.
Well, no, the goal is you keep doing that stuff, and it's going to help protect it so that you're not getting knee issues. It's part of that's why I like a lot of all the movement. Focusing on movement-based, exercises, because you're trying to build elasticity and strength into all the tissue. So for instance, like some of my soccer players, we're having them focus on like walking on the blades of their feet, and walking with their, walking on the insides of their feet, and just trying to get a lot of that ankle mobility back in there, because because if the crap's always gonna hit the fan, and so somebody's gonna twist their ankle, and so if you got that mobility and that strength in there, it's a difference between like a mild sprain or like a pretty severe sprain, so
Right.
if something is super tight, it's not gonna give way that much, so you just try to teach the whole body, like, hey, keep that motion in there, and that's kind of hard for a lot of people that that just do so much computer work, throughout the day, because we're always just stuck in that one position, and we're never practicing, stuff. So it's use it or lose it.
So I want to go back to wedding days where there's a waiting time and we can do stretches and things like that, and we have equipment, and obviously, we're not lifting weights. But what kind of stretches do you think we should probably try when we're just waiting? Let's say we always have a 20-minute lag time between the actual ceremony and we're just standing around.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably, I mean, for me, I would be focusing on diaphragmatic breathing, because that's your diaphragm's actually a core muscle, and it's going to calm you down as well. I would probably get into that acid grass, squat, and kind of stretch my hips down there. A lot of times I'll kind of grab my thighs and kind of push them outwards, when I'm in that position, or I'll grab onto my opposite ankle and kind of rotate, my whole body, so my whole rib cage gets stretched open, and more stuff
Is
like
that when
that.
is that when you stand on one leg and you have your kind of your foot on your butt cheek, maybe kind of holding it with both arms?
No,
Or
no,
something?
you're just in that deep squat, and
Oh,
then
deep
and
squat.
then, yeah,
Gotcha.
and so I'm gonna take my right hand and I'm gonna grab my left ankle, and then I'm gonna take my left hand and just kind of reach all the way, up like that, and get my ribs kind of stretched out. So
Gotcha.
it's like a rib slash, hip stretch, pretty much everything stretch.
Gotcha. So we have this. Hopefully, we'll release this YouTube video, and you can see what Dr. Jeremiah was doing earlier as far as reaching. But one of the popular stretches that you tell me and also your other patients is stretching your hip reflexor, right?
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
left foot forward and then just kind of.
Yeah, a lot of times when I'm showing people that now, I'll show people more like the two joint hip flexor. I used to show people the psoas. It's basically this, it's kind of like a warrior pose in yoga, because everybody that I would come into contact, I'm like, damn, your hip flexors are so tight. Stretch your damn hip flexors, stretch your hip flexors. And then after about 5 years of stretching them and working on everybody's hip flexors, I started trying to figure out, well, why is everybody's hip flexors so tight? And so I ended up finding out, like, across the board, everybody's hip flexors were just really, really weak.
Right.
To the point that we'll see people that can squat, 500 pounds, and their hip flexors are so weak I can use a finger to, blow the muscle out.
Yeah.
So a lot of what I try to show people now is strengthen your hip flexors.
And how do you do that?
Slow marching or slow crawling.
Bear crawl or hands
No,
and
crawling,
knees?
crawling like a baby, or even kind of like a Spider-Man crawl on the ground, but just super, super, super slow.
When I YouTube Spider-Man crawl, it looks like it's very hard. It's like you're doing a push-up and you're crawling.
Yeah, yeah. So that's why I say start off with the baby crawl, because
Gotcha.
that's why every single baby, crawls for so long, is because they're building up lumbopelvic stability. So they're teaching their core and their hips how to kind of work together to stabilize their spine, so they can do something more advanced like that squat that we talked about, and walking. But you can see, like how biomechanically, like, people start kind of getting, into trouble because we're all walking around, or at least a lot of the athletes that I'll see, are walking, running, squatting, and yet their core muscles, or those hip flexors, just aren't firing off right.
So I try to do crawling at least once a week. How often do we need to be doing it in a given 7 days? And then also, how long do we time ourselves? Do we count to 10?
I think I think it's one of those very, very underrated exercises, and I think people for best results, should do stuff like that daily.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we need to just warm up first, or do we need to just walk,
No,
or
like
do we just go in?
again, it's I'm a huge fan of because again, like when somebody starts fatiguing, they're typically going to start cheating and they're going to start using other muscles other than their core. So I say just do like little micro bits, kind of throughout the day. That might be like a good way to kind of break it up for like, getting off your computer, stand up and, maybe do your ass to grass squat and then maybe stand up and start doing some slow marching, just to get your core muscles engaged. And even from like a blood vessel and lymphatic perspective or vascular perspective, that's going to help alleviate that as well. So that's one of those things. Like I said, we sit so much that we should be doing that all throughout the day.
For you? What's your process like? Do you have a morning routine where you do some of these exercises? Is that something we should be thinking about as soon as we wake up?
I don't do it, as soon as I wake up. I typically like when I get out of the shower. But I'm always, I'm always trying to multitask. I'm always like, well, how can I incorporate like movement into like whatever it is, that I'm doing. So from maybe crawling around, on my hands and knees in the morning, or walking, silly. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's just teaching my muscles how to move in different positions. Or maybe I might, brush my teeth, standing on one leg, or I might, cook, breakfast, standing on one leg. Or I might try to take, 3 steps, at a time sideways, so I'm just going to kind of always just play.
Some of these things you don't necessarily have to schedule it throughout the day. Like if you have a baby and you're playing with your baby, maybe you can do some crawling with her.
I mean, I think that's the big thing is that we become grown-ups. And like when when I watch my kids, they're all over the place. They're on the ground, they're rolling around, they're hanging off stuff, they're climbing, they're moving. And so like as we start kind of getting older, we start having that grown up where we just stand there and watch them.
Right.
And we stop moving, and again, it's a use it or lose it.
Right.
And so I think that's what it has to do with is remembering to play throughout the day, and stop being so stiff, stop being a grown up.
What about abs? What about core exercises or muscles? Is that important to develop and make sure we have strength there?
I mean the core is kind of pretty broad. So there's a great test, that I'll put some of my athletes through. Yeah, it's a university. It was from a university study. It's called the Bunke test, the Bunke test. And so it tests, core myofascial endurance. But there's, like I said, there's a bunch of different planes of your core. There's a bunch of different, levels of your core. So, it's not just one of those like, hey, start doing, sit-ups, but maybe one version of your core is focusing on your diaphragmatic breathing, because a lot of people just don't breathe right. And so your diaphragm is actually like a pressure regulator for your spine. So if you're not breathing right, you're not going to have enough stability. Or doing stomach vacuums, or like I said, that crawling is really good for the frontal stability. Or rolling on the ground, it's called rolling patterns, helps kind of strengthen up your obliques, the rotational, stability. So
what do you think about sit-ups? Is that a good thing?
I'm not a huge fan of the sit-ups.
Yeah, you've told me that before.
Yeah.
Why is that?
I think it depending on wherever somebody's weak, they're going to have a tendency to overcompensate.
Right.
So for instance, again, like I remember I got my wife this great, trainer, like one of the best girls in Charleston. And so they would do this workout, and then they would finish up like trying to do specific, like, core exercises. And they push it too far. So like, the trainer was, happy after this whole gauntlet. And so she's like, all right, where do you feel the burn? And my wife would be like, in my neck.
Oh.
And, so the next time they would try to do it again. All right, now where do you feel the burn? And she's like, yeah, in my neck. So for my wife at the time, her core muscles were so weak and just weren't engaging. She was just using her neck to actually make the movement happen. Or when I used to have a lot of, back issues, I didn't realize, but I would cheat with my jaw. I would take my jaw and I would grit it down, and it would make my core muscles strong. But that was one of the reasons why I was starting to kind of grit my teeth at night and start blowing my teeth out. So sit-ups I don't really find very like functional, and again that's what I like is more like functional type of core exercises.
What would be a better exercise, like leg lifts?
You could do leg lifts. Again, the crawling, deadlifts, stuff like that. Side planks, rolling side planks, and not necessarily.
What about planks? Period, where you have your hands in front of you and your feet up.
I love them. I love them. I don't love the trying to hold it for 5 minutes at a time type thing.
That's a long time.
Yeah, because again that's starting to those the weak guys crap out, and then your body will use like your eyeball muscles to make it happen.
Right. What about back extensions? Are those good in your opinion?
They could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, they could be. We'll see a lot of weak backs. I think it just depends on the person, where they're weak, where things are unstable.
Yeah. Is yoga a good thing?
It can be. But again, it's one of those over specialization things. Again, when I'm always trying to dial stuff back, like my first bunch of years, we'd get an athlete in, and his hamstrings would be super, super tight, and I would be, trying to beat up the hamstrings and trying to stretch it, over his head. And then eventually, like as we had to, dial things back, I was like, all right, well, why is this guy's hamstrings, so weak? And it would turn out that they were doing it, the job for his butt muscles, because he was a desk jockey. He sat at the computer all day long. His butt muscles were always in the off position, but he wanted to be a runner, so it's kind of like his glutes couldn't push his hips all the way back, so it would recruit his hamstrings. So yeah, his hamstrings were always tight because they were always overworked and underpaid.
Oh.
So that's what I caution people from is just doing that same thing over and over again. So people say, man, my hamstrings are tight, let me just stretch, instead of like, well, okay, why are these things so tight?
Yeah. What about bridges? Are those exercises any good?
Glute bridges?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I love glute bridges.
So give us a little description. What's a glute bridge?
So like a glute bridge is you basically like lying on the ground on your back, and you've got your feet are on the ground, and you're trying to pinch your butt cheeks and kind of lift your hips off the ground, or you can put like your shoulders on the couch, and same thing, kind of lift your butt off the ground.
Or a bench, right?
Or a bench, yeah.
So do you put weights, or do you just do it just natural?
What I tell every single patient is to spend 2 weeks just pinching your butt cheeks together like you're trying to murder a quarter in there. Just do an isometric glute contraction. So I had spent years upon years with back and disc issues, and that was one of my first like light bulb, like aha type.
For you had disc.
For me, yeah. I spent a lot of time in with back issues. You name it, pretty much almost anything I treat, I managed to jack it up on myself. That's why that's how I had to figure out how to get these things better.
So do we do that once a week or whenever we can, every day?
I tell people do butt crunches all the time. It's one of those, you can be at your desk or stuck in traffic and just squeeze your cheeks together. Make sure that your butt muscles are engaged and working right.
If we were to YouTube glute bridges, we should be able to find that, right? How to do it, because there's a lot of the internet is such a great resource on if you don't know how to do something.
I would say there's this glute guru that I've learned a bunch from. His name's Brett Contreras. They literally call him the glute guy. This dude got his PhD in butt muscles.
Really?
Yeah.
So he shows what?
He pretty much anything having to do with glutes. This dude wrote like a 675-page book about glutes and gluteal physiology.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what's his name again?
Brett Contreras.
So why is that important? Why is glute exercises important? What does that do?
The reason being is because it's such a huge biomechanical like foundation. So like imagine if you're like, if you're bending forward, it's kind of like your glutes are your anchor point. And so if your glutes aren't firing right, if they're not doing their job, like your hamstrings are going to jump in, or your back muscles, somebody else is going to jump in for that. And so, like, for instance, when we're
Jump in as in overcompensate.
yeah, it's going to overcompensate. So for instance, right now, you and I are sitting right now and our glutes are in the off position. And so neurologically, our body gets really good at doing what it does the most. So if our glutes are in the off position, they're just going to get used to that. And so now you're going to want to go and you're going to want to, squat or deadlift or run across the road or pick up your kid or pick up a heavy bag of groceries. And maybe that big glute muscle on the outside isn't doing his deal. So somebody else is going to. It might be your piriformis, and now all of a sudden you've got like sciatic shooting down your leg, or it's going to be your back muscle or something.
So that could explain probably why we have knee pain, or maybe plantar fasciitis.
Absolutely.
Or because the glutes are not
the glutes are
they're not doing their job
right.
Yeah,
that was and like I said, when I was having my issues, that was my first like light bulb movement. And it wasn't because I hadn't done glute bridges, man. I had done glute bridges till I was blue in the face,
right.
But my glutes weren't doing it, and again, it's that quality of that contraction and contraction. So that's why, like, I tell everybody, for about two weeks, just focus on pinching your butt cheeks together, because you'll be amazed. And this is what had happened to me is when I went to go pinch my butt cheeks together, you could just feel that the butt muscles just didn't feel strong. It wasn't like me kind of like shaking your hand and feeling my hand strong.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of like the glutes just kind of like limped in, like or I'll tell people, I'm like, hey, I want you to squeeze your butt cheeks together, and they're like, that's really weird, but I feel my thighs trying to do all that work.
Yeah.
Or I feel my back doing all that work.
Right.
So again, your body's just thinking in terms of point A to point B, and we build up these goofy little patterns in us.
So for people out there that are, there was a point where I was just so stressed, I was so overworked, and I was so overwhelmed. I had so much work, and I just like pretty much I don't have time to exercise. And then now I'm like, okay, well, I think I really need to take care of myself. Where do we start? Let's say I'm overweight and I need to really get my butt in gear and get back into shape.
Is
it exercise? Like
I don't
nutrition?
think it's exercise. Yeah, I don't think it's exercise. Like we'll tell in integrative medicine, that's what will end up happening. Somebody will come to us sick. They've got an autoimmune issue, and for that reason, they're like, I can't lose weight, and they're like, so I want to go and I want to hit these heavy classes, and I want to really lose weight, and then they get frustrated because they can't lose weight. So I think the first thing is to de-stress. Go for a walk. There's all these studies. Forest bathing. Go for a walk in the woods and de-stress. Go by water and de-stress. And the reason why that's tremendous in terms of weight loss is because your stress hormones are cortisol. Cortisol is it's a glucocorticoid, right? So every time you get stressed, every time you get pissed off at your boss or pissed off in traffic, your blood sugar spikes up like you just had a Snickers bar.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what can happen too with some of those heavy duty classes. Anytime you start training for, longer, intense training for longer than 25 minutes, so I'm saying like a 25-minute long class or a 25-minute long run, you start boosting up those stress hormones. So you start spiking your blood sugar up through the roof.
So, and then after that, what do? Do you just watch diet? Is it nutrition?
Yeah. I would definitely focus on diet. From there. I'm a huge fan of just cutting out. Cut out the processed foods. So follow a paleo-ish diet, but everybody's different. Everybody's gut bacteria is different. So you got to kind of figure out like what works for you. And that's why, there's so many gurus, out there saying, like, hey, man, my diet's the way if you want to heal yourself. But everybody is just biochemically unique, and we have just a whole unique set of bacteria. So, maybe you can process dairy, but, I can't process dairy. So it's, right. I typically tell people to cut a lot of stuff out of their diet, gluten, dairy, Definitely the process, stuff, and then you can try adding stuff back in after, maybe 30 days and see how it makes you feel.
Yeah.
But yeah.
When do you know to start the heavy lifting? Obviously you want to see a trainer if you want to start lifting weights and then doing some cardio stuff. When do you know when to do that?
In
When
the
is the right
beginning,
time?
in the beginning, I tell people just go for like a walk, or just do something kind of calm and kind of relaxing. That's kind of getting your blood vessels kind of going, your lymphatic tissue kind of going, and then start with if they haven't been training, start with the basics, start with baby type exercises.
Gotcha.
So start with some of the crawling, or start with maybe like an adult remedial gymnastics program,
Yeah.
or there's another good program out there called Animal Flow. Just kind of getting some of that movement, practicing that movement again, because you don't want somebody that is stiff, hasn't been untraining, and then just going after advanced exercises.
Gotcha. So let's go back to your treating your patients. Do you give them, or do you suggest getting like steroid shots when they have a pain or something like that? Do you do any of that? You have some technology that you use at your other office as well, right?
We use all different types of stuff. We've got whole body cryotherapy. We've got a whole body photobiomodulation. So that's like that's like a light therapy, almost kind of like a low level laser. We typically try to recommend, not to do the corticosteroid shots. But it's kind of it's definitely a case by case basis. If somebody is absolutely dying, they're 10 out of 10 pain, it's like sometimes we have to have them get a corticosteroid shot. But everything is in context.
What about, have you tried like maybe CBD with your patients and things like that?
Yeah, we use CBD. It's great immune modulator, so it's great for your immune system, and we've got our own endocannabinoid receptors in our body, so we know that's a good thing.
Does it work for a lot of people? I've heard some success on some people.
Yeah. We go through quite a bit of CBD in the office, and most people notice at least something from better sleep to just feeling less stress, to less cravings for any type of bad stuff, to decrease pain and inflammation. It's across the board.
Have you heard of hyperbaric chambers?
Yep.
Do you recommend those?
I do.
What do those do?
Especially if you have any brain injuries, like severe cognition, severe central nervous system type things. It kind of increases the red blood cells, in the brain.
Gotcha. Does that help with like any inflammation or anything, or?
It can, yeah.
Yeah.
We would recommend stuff like that. Get somebody in there like after a concussion or something.
Gotcha. But not like any back pain or anything like that, or?
Not necessarily for back pain.
Yeah. That's more for you said concussion and.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for participating in our little podcast. I learned a lot. I know that was a lot of information.
That was awesome.
If they're local, or maybe not even local, if they want to come see you, where can they find you?
You can find me at buildmestronger.com, and we're just about to launch it's more of like functional medicine, integrative medicine website called Stop Chasing Symptoms, and so that's for somebody trying to get to their root cause of their health issues, anything from rheumatoid arthritis or Crohn's or IBS, stuff that other doctors are having challenges with, and not necessarily going after it with the medicine route.
So anybody that has any injuries before surgery, I recommend seeing Dr. Jeremiah. That's usually just a second opinion or something. right? And before, if your doctor say, "Oh, we need to give you some shots or whatever,"
Yeah,
that's
and be prepared. It's happened. Before we've had people like wait to the very last minute till they're scheduled for surgery in like 4 days, and then they come see me for a last ditch effort, and then get freaked out when when we take away the pain.
yeah.
And they're like, well, crap. What do I do now?
Cancel the
Like,
surgery.
I'm like, hey man, that's
Has that
that's
happened
you.
when they cancel the surgery because you fixed him?
Not coming from days ahead of time.
Not
But
in that
yeah,
simplified term.
yeah. Like we've definitely had people, plenty of people avoid, tons of surgery. But I'm just laughing at some of those cases where it's like, hey
Right.
man, I've got this in like 3 days from now. What can you do? And
Yeah.
and when they serendipitously walk out in less pain.
Right. Well, I know my wife saw you with her shoulder problem. Everybody seems to have this shoulder or neck problem, and she went to
Yeah.
see you, and she was very happy with the result. I think you only worked with her once, and she wishes she could come back. And
Yeah.
I was like, why don't you just make an appointment? And
the name
you
of the
helped
game.
you helped her a lot, and I know you've helped me a lot with my tennis elbow, my knee, plantar fasciitis, my lower back.
Load your back
It's
out,
like
yeah.
immediately if something happens, something pops, like, oh crap, I have you on speed dial, and I want to get on that schedule because you're only in Somerville. I live in Somerville, and he's got a Charleston office. You're on Somerville. What days? Wednesday?
I'm typically go to Somerville all day Mondays, all day Wednesdays, and Saturday mornings, and then I do the opposite for the other office.
For the other office. And for my lower back, I think I really had to beg Didi. I was like, Didi, I got to get in. You got to get me in. And sure enough, I mean,
we
oh
can
man.
we can always get the emergency cases in.
Yeah.
I love doing this stuff. I stick around for my lunches. I stick around after work. So
Right,
Yeah.
right. That was really awesome. So I think you're definitely a healer, and you guys definitely have to see this guy here. I don't know if you're from out of town, or if you are, well, hopefully you can try to make an appointment and come down to Charleston and come see this guy. He is awesome. I think you're one of the most underrated doctors out there. A lot of people don't know about you, and I always suggest you. Like I've had friends that are in gymnastics, like, you got to go see Jeremiah. You got to go see Jeremiah, and they don't end up calling you, and I feel like they're missing out.
a lot of times,
So-
what will end up happening with that is that they might hear it from you, and then eventually they end up hearing it from somebody else that doesn't know you. And
Right.
So after they hear it like 2 or 3 times, then they're like, all right.
Everybody seems to know everybody, someone, but I think they need to give you a shot because you are helping a lot of people here in town.
We try.
What's your patient population right now? I mean,
I haven't the foggiest idea. I
mean, you're busy.
Since 2008. So the Post and Courier did a story on me in 2008, and so we had 100 new patients that month. And then and that was just word of mouth. And then after that, it was like 50 new patients. So when we calculate it out, it's about 856 new patients word of mouth every single year.
holy cow! And these patients range from athletes, CrossFitters, runners,
Yeah,
all the way up to
across the board. Yeah.
older people that are having all kinds of chronic pain.
Yep. I love it all.
So I guess, do you assume like they're fine when you don't see them anymore? Like you fix them? Do you get offended? Like, I haven't seen you in a couple months.
Sometimes, yes, yeah. I mean, for me, it's because I'm so passionate about it. Like sometimes somebody will disappear, and I'm like, oh man, I'm like, I hope I fix them, and sure enough, I might run into them like at the grocery store, or they might come in like a couple years later on, and they'll say like, oh my God, you changed my life.
Yeah.
And so that's always great to hear. I always love the awesome feedback about how I've changed somebody's life.
The success stories.
Yeah.
What about maintenance? Is there a type of maintenance that you suggest come see you? Like if people, especially people that are in town?
Yeah. I mean, we, it's nothing that I really push on people, but that's what ends up happening is people say, I really feel good, when I come in. So everybody's a little bit different. Sometimes we'll get people, training for like a specific race or an event or something like that. And so as their mileage or as their work, increases, they might see me a little bit more frequently, maybe like once a week or something.
Like for me, like I don't think there's anything wrong with me right now, but I feel like I want to see you just for maintenance and maybe a little, what you did to me with my lower back, you just made it pop, and that was like, man, what was that? That felt kind of good.
Yeah.
And it came out of nowhere. You just I don't know what you
Yeah,
did, but
I kind of, if somebody comes in and they're not, in pain, I'm kind of covering them kind of, head to toe, and I'm trying to figure out like what are your biggest biomechanical things that I can see going on? Like what is your minimal effort, maximum benefit? What are like 2 or 3 things that you can do that is going to be a game changer even though you don't have pain? And
yeah.
every time, I see somebody, with that, maybe you might come in and you took care of that and you got that better. So then I'm going to, again, kind of go through everything with a fine tooth comb and I'm like, all right, you just work on these things and this will take you to that next level, so it's.
One thing I love about coming to your practice is you don't really push packages like other chiropractors do. You don't, you're not selling things. It's like seriously just for your, like, how can we make you or help you better? And there's like no pressure, you walk in, you take care of business, and it's like, okay, wow, I feel good, I feel better.
Yep.
And that's what I love about your practice. So
stress free, nothing uncomfortable.
I feel like when I go see some of these marathon, when I sign up for a race, there's always like a what do you call this, where the vendors are set up.
Yeah.
And there's like chiropractors set up there, and I feel like, all right, hey, come see us, and then they want to kind of check you out, and then by the way,
talk with our financial specialist.
Yes.
And
yeah, and there's like a package. Oh yeah, we can sell you this package, or but with you, it's like no pressure, and it's like you go in there, all right, what's wrong with you? All right, what's the problem? And then let's go ahead and fix it. So
I mean, I'm even happy as a clam if people just even listen to this podcast here and take some of the suggestions from that and get themselves out of pain, like just as long as you're being actionable, like that's awesome.
How does appointment works with you? Do we just call you and then set up an appointment either Charleston or Somerville?
Yeah, you typically just call into the office and my wonderful assistant Dee Dee will set you up, and that's pretty much the big thing.
That's awesome. Thanks again for coming here, and we're going to wrap it up from there. Thanks again, guys, for listening, and hopefully if we have other questions regarding this topic, just DM me or message me or email me, and maybe we can have Dr. Jeremiah again for another episode, for another Q&A.
Anytime.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
No problem.